Uh, Thank you, Professor Rajesh, and my greetings to Professor Naresh, Professor Rishabh, and other distinguished participants in this very important conference on new populism. Uh, I believe this is a curtain raiser workshop because you're having your formal inauguration of the conference after the workshop. And I do hope that this session would raise a range of questions which the conference would deliberate on as we move ahead. When Naresh approached me to be part of this conference, I readily agreed. And when he asked me for a topic, I said I would like to dialogue on new populism narratives from the lens of how reporting on electoral politics happens. I said this is the limited canvas that I would take to present my perception on the issue. Let me add 3 points to begin with as I start this discussion. I'm going to focus on new populism in the print, electronic, and social media. And I'm using the last 1 decade in India, especially with the campaign for the 2014 elections and the way media reported that particular campaign, going on to the 2019 elections and the various state assembly elections that have happened in between. These would be the sites I would use for my analysis of how leadership has, how media has reflected on election campaigns and how it represents and reflects these strands of new populism. I'm going to choose a particular theme. When I look at media reporting on election campaigns, there is a lot of literature, not just about India, but about a lot of parliamentary systems, where people say that the reporting of elections in parliamentary systems is more a reporting of what is called the prime ministerialization of election campaigns. I am desisting from using the word presidential style elections because I would want to distinguish between elections in presidential systems and parliamentary systems. I don't think parliamentary systems like India are having a presidentialization of campaign reporting, but I would prefer to use the term prime ministerialization of the reporting. And I think there is an important distinction. I could talk about that if there is a need later as part of the discussion. Now, getting straight into the discussion, when I talk of media, when I talk of election campaigns, when I talk of electoral outcomes, and how has the media projected the issues in the election, my major argument is twofold, which in a sense represents the new populism. Number one, the media has played a major role in what I would call projecting leadership attributes as part of its reporting on campaigns. And this projection of leadership attributes has been a critical factor in driving voter choice in these elections. Let me take 1 or 2 examples to elaborate this point. I would draw your attention to a very well-known journalist's book, Prashant Jha. Prashant Jha refers to, talks about in his book, the title of his book is How the BJP Wins Elections. And if you read that book, I don't think you require any more proof of new populism as seen in the way the media reports on elections. Or look at Rajdeep Sardesai's book on the 2019 election. The title of the book itself, How Modi Won India. That's the title of the book. How Modi Won India. And I would see these two, Prashant Jha and Rajdeep Sardesai, as being two important journalists in terms of how they report and how they have catalogued media reporting on elections. One is about the 2019 elections in specific. The other is about right from 2014 onwards, what has happened. Let me take two examples for this again. All of you would have noticed this. When the 2014 election happened, in India, elections happen over several phases. Whenever there was an election, now on whichever day the election or the voting was happening in a particular area, please look at the newspapers that came out in that city. Wherever the election was happening on a particular day, voting was happening. Vernacular media, English media, whichever language. You look at the newspaper, I'm just taking newspaper as an example. Except maybe in 2014, and that also did not happen in 2019, except the Hindu. In 2019, Hindu also became part of that. All newspapers, all had the entire front page of the newspaper devoted to an advertisement by one political party. Is it that they only had the funds? My answer is no. Everybody had the funds. But here was a party thinking well ahead, blocking time and making sure that they came on all the front pages of newspapers. When readers opened that paper to go and cast their vote that day, later that day, early morning when they opened the newspaper, this is what they saw. Parties were the ones which took maximum advantage, thanks to media, of this multiple phases of elections. When you have elections on different days, again, please notice 2014-2019 campaign. Whenever there was voting happening in some part of India, in some other part of India where voting was not happening, there was a road show by leaders, which was being broadcast live on social media and on television. So you cannot campaign on voting day, but you have used social media and electronic media so effectively to be able to bring to the laptops and drawing rooms of people the campaign of a leader on a day when actually there should be no campaigning at all. The day when people go to vote. Friends, I'm asking you to look at the implications of this trend, the implications of this process. I have 2-3 other points to make on this. And this is a question I'm asking all of you experts on journalism and media. Is the media reporting of elections, especially around 2014 and later, been more of a narrative on personal reputations rather than party performances? Is it a narrative of personal reputations? When you say Ab ki baar Modi Sarkar, or if you say Singh is king, I'm pushing it back a little more to 2009, when you said Singh is king, referring to Manmohan Singh. How many of you will recall what Sonia Gandhi did on the day the election, where the day the Congress party released its election manifesto? she held up the manifesto with Dr. Manmohan Singh, and that manifesto had two photographs, Sonia Gandhi and Manmohan Singh. And some press reporter asked Sonia Gandhi, so you are not declaring a prime ministerial face? And Sonia Gandhi did something very interesting. She covered her face and said, here is our prime ministerial face. And that was splashed everywhere the next day. And then the slogan came up, Singh is king. And once the victory was over, it was endorsed as Singh is king. Or what would you say in the 2014 campaign where Chandrababu Naidu, who was then in alliance, then a part of NDA, said in the Andhra campaign, and the media lapped it up, that Namo is not Narendra Modi, but Namo is Naidu Modi. Namo means Naidu and Modi together. Now, do you need, and this again became very prominent in the media, do you need a better example of the personal rather than the party reputation being at stake? Let me come to another point. I know that Naresh said I have, am I right, Naresh, 10 minutes for me?
Yeah, I mean, totally 20-25 minutes.
Okay, then I'll take another 5-6 minutes to make the points I want to make. The second point I wanted to make, and here media again plays a major role. During the Delhi campaign, Delhi Assembly campaign, Arvind Kejriwal made an interesting comment, which was again projected by the media very well. In his bidding for a second term of office, Arvind Kejriwal said in a press conference, even if I have fulfilled 30% of the promises I made in 2015, I will win the election. Because it's enough for me to fulfill 30% of my promises, because that means people believe that I have done the right thing. I won't mention the name of a leader. A leader, when giving an interview to me just before the 2019 campaign starting, said, Shastri ji, नियत साफ रहनी चाहिए, लोगों के मन में नियत साफ रहनी चाहिए. Let me translate that into English. He said, Mr. Shastri, in the perception of the people, my intentions should be pure. It's not as important. I mean, what I actually did is not as important as my intentions being pure. And my question is, who projects whether those intentions are pure or not? Where is it? Who is it? And through which way is this intentions are pure actually projected? Now, I have two more points to make, and then I'm going to come to, I have one more point to make, and then I'm going to come to I'm going to take certain examples to reflect on this new populism. A study that we did a few years after the 2019 elections, 2 years after it, on social media and elections, shows something very interesting. Very few people changed their view because of what social media said. Most people reinforced their views because of what social media said, was one finding of our study. That social media did not change people's political preferences. It only reinforced political preferences that I already had. What do I mean by this? When I receive a social media post, which is the one I save and which is the one I forward, I save and forward that social media post which endorses what I believe in. And that social media post which goes against what I believe in is very, very conveniently, immediately deleted. And who do I forward it to? Who do I forward that social media post which I like a lot to? I forward it to people who think like me. I forward it to people who have the same worldview as I have. So it is a circulation of views on politics among people who think similarly. So the larger point I'm trying to make is social media to a certain extent reinforces existing preferences, does not really change preferences. And to this, I would add another point, which is this. We have found in our studies that now, and this number has increased, a very high percentage of respondents tell us that we have decided who to vote for much before the election is announced. And we have found this consistently since 2014. That when did you decide who to vote for? The answer was much before the election was announced, which means candidate does not matter. Who a party puts up in a constituency does not matter. You have decided on which party you want to vote for, and I would argue you have decided which party you want to vote for based upon who is leading that. A small data point on this. On 2014, we asked respondents, if Mr. Modi were not the prime ministerial candidate of the BJP, would you change the way you voted? If Mr. Modi were not the prime ministerial candidate of the BJP, would you change the way you voted? If you look at those who voted for BJP, 1/4 of those who voted for BJP said, yes, we would change the way we vote. Implication, 25% of the vote that the BJP was getting was because of its leadership. You come to the 2019 election, the same question was asked. It has gone up from 24% to 32%. From 1/4, it has gone up to 1/3. 1/3 saying that if 1/3 of BJP voters saying, if Mr. Modi were not the prime ministerial candidate, we would not have it. My final set of comments with regard to the rise of this new populism. I'm going to just take 3 examples to highlight this. If you look at the 2014 campaign and how the campaign was projected by the media, most media reporting would show you the BJP was seen to be very aggressive against the UPA. They made the best of the anti-incumbency vote. They made the best of the anti-incumbency sentiment. And secondly, the prime ministerial candidate and the party stressed on development. That we are focusing on development. And both were extremely popular ways of capturing the public imagination. The strong anti-UPA sentiment and the fact that we are going to focus on development, Vikas. See? Come down to 2019, there was no UPA to fight against. You now had to defend your record. Development also went to the background. And suddenly national security came to the front. Remember, till February 2019, the BJP was seen as likely to face anti-incumbency sentiment. All studies said that till February 2019. March 2019, Pulwama, Balakot, etc., etc. And the entire narrative changes to security, patriotism, nationalism. And this is what the media also projects. Phir ek baar Modi Sarkar. That becomes the slogan. And phir ek baar Modi Sarkar, why? On the grounds of national security, on the grounds of patriotism. Friends, I want you to see the shift of the narratives and how these narratives are reflected in the media and how this is impacting on popular sentiments. Let me take a second example. In 2019, Rahul Gandhi started off with a great slogan, Chaukidar Chor Hai. Now, Prime Minister Modi had called himself constantly not the Prime Minister, but the first servant of the people. So now Rahul Gandhi coined the slogan, Chaukidar Chor Hai. What happened? The BJP immediately shifted the narrative and said, Main bhi chaukidar. Every BJP leader, every BJP supporter on all social media posts, their DM was, Main bhi chaukidar. And what does our study show? And this is important for me. 1/4 of those who heard both these slogans, 1/4 of those who heard both these slogans voted for non-NDA parties. And half of those who heard both these slogans actually voted for the NDA. Half of those who heard both these slogans actually voted for the NDA. My final point. Especially if you look at the 2019 campaign and how the media projected the campaign of the Prime Minister, especially in 3 states, Uttar Pradesh, West Bengal, and Odisha. I don't know how many of you have seen this. The bulk of the Prime Minister's rallies happened in these 3 states, Uttar Pradesh, West Bengal, and Odisha in 2019. Because the BJP realized how Odisha, West Bengal, and UP was important. And if you track the Prime Minister's campaign as the media did, in UP, the focus was attacking Akhilesh Yadav and Mayawati. In West Bengal, it was Mamta. And of course, in Odisha, it was Naveen Patnaik. Because the BJP, in a sense, realized that if we are to really move forward, we need to retain UP, we need to break ground in West Bengal, and we need to break ground in Odisha. Whatever else we are likely to lose in the rest of the country, we make up through West Bengal and Odisha. And the media projected this very, very emphatically as you went along. And this was what the BJP at the end of the day did. So friends, here were certain strands of thoughts which I felt like sharing with you all about how media projections during the last decade in Indian elections clearly shows how, in a sense, parties and leaders have been able to ensure that in the media, their image is projected in a particular way, which for me represents the new forms of populism that is increasingly emerging. I would stop here and apologize if I've taken a little more than the time than what I should have taken.